So many people have been shocked by the New York Times' incredibly biased coverage of the events in Palestine, which has a very pro-Israel slant. Because many Americans still have this view of the Times as a respected and authoritative news outlet. But people need to understand that they have always been a propaganda arm of US empire and Zionism by extension. Let's not forget that it was the New York Times who published a front-page article falsely claiming that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, which was later used as the pretext for the disastrous US-led invasion of Iraq, which killed hundreds of thousands of people and allowed extremist groups like ISIS to gain power. Of course, we would later find out that Saddam Hussein did not in fact have weapons of mass destruction, and this New York Times reporter, Judith Miller, had been fed fake stories by US intelligence agencies, which she then published uncritically. They were literally acting as a propaganda arm of the CIA and the US State Department. It was so bad that they eventually had to issue a public apology, but by that time the US had already invaded Iraq and killed thousands. I'll give you another example from around the same time period. In 2002, when the democratically elected leader of Venezuela, Hugo Chavez, was literally kidnapped and ousted in a coup, the New York Times celebrated this as a win for democracy. Rather than informing the American public that President Chavez had been kidnapped, they lied and said that he had resigned, and then celebrated the fact that power was handed to a respected business leader named Pedro Carmona, despite the fact that Carmona had never run in Venezuela's elections and therefore could not be the democratically elected candidate. Also ignoring the fact that Carmona and the US-backed right-wing forces who perpetrated this coup had seized all of the media outlets as well as shuttered the Supreme Court and the National Assembly. Incredibly undemocratic and authoritarian moves which the New York Times ignored while calling Hugo Chavez the dictator. These were just blatant lies published in the pages of the New York Times at the behest of the CIA and US imperialism. A president who was twice democratically elected in 1998 and 2000 was kidnapped by US-backed right-wing extremists, and the Times declared that as a win for democracy. So if you're surprised that the New York Times is now doing terrible coverage of Palestine, you shouldn't be. They've always been a propaganda arm of the US empire. They're owned by the same capitalist ruling class who perpetrates wars and illegal coups all around the world. You can't trust an outlet like that. The only outlets you can trust are ones that are funded and run by working class people, like MidwesternMarks.com. Help us out by supporting us on Patreon, by the way. Thanks, everyone.